So with that, you know what? Let's just jump into it. We're going to pick up where we left off with our equipment chapter. To make your mark on the world, you'll need to have the right equipment, including armor, weapons, and other gear. This chapter presents the various equipment that you can purchase during character creation and can usually purchase in most cities and other large settlements. Your character starts out with 150 silver pieces to spend on any common items from this chapter. Items with an uncommon rarity can only be bought with special access or GM permission. If you're playing a spellcaster and want to buy magic items like potions, scrolls, or holy water, or an alchemist and want alchemical items, your GM can give you permission to buy those, and she will tell you which items you can choose from and how much they cost. Once you've purchased your starting items, there are 3 main ways to gain new items and equipment. You can find them during an adventure, make them with a crafting skill, or purchase them from a merchant. Now, conspicuously, because we've brought up things that this book asserts by typing it out in front of you. It is what's missing from that list. Now, there could be a devil in the details, but what, as far as item acquisition, what's missing from that list? You know what? Hang on. I guess technically it is said fine during an adventure, but the first thing that came to mind is, I mean, when you loot a body, right? Bandits attack you, and you defend yourself against them, and you realize that they have stuff that you can sell. I guess that's folded. It's said very nicely. It's a little bit of in D&D, at least in the local circles here, we call that greyhawking the body. And that's just where, you know what? If the corpse has a gold tooth, you even pry that out. Even if you're like a lawful good paladin or something, like you just, every corpse on the road is naked and, by the time the party's done with them. Now, this is injecting real life into fantasy, and you could argue as well that D&D, because it has silver pieces and even copper pieces, though as they do wish to make silver pieces the common currency here in their game world, silver does tarnish. And one of the reasons why we as a species have chosen gold as a monetary backup or as a way to preserve wealth is because gold doesn't tarnish. Gold is very easy to melt and sculpt. Pardon me. So you can make it into items or bars or whatever you want. And gold is also scarce. And so you have these elements of preservation, manipulation, and scarcity. And it makes for a very, very good unit of currency. And actually, when we first brought was it last night? No, it was prior to that. If the technology, or the magic was around, and you can insert this into your own game world, an even rarer metal for the time would have been aluminum. If you want a metal that's kind of easy to shape, that was scarce. Now you're like, well, aluminum is everywhere. I mean, planes and cans and all sorts of things. Boats or trailers or all sorts of things are made of aluminum, and that is very true. Aluminum is actually abundant, but the way that it is processed and harvested out of the soil, that's what was lacking before. So if you want a fun and interesting way to shake up your campaign world, and you want a metal that doesn't tarnish and is easy to or like corrode or oxidize, etc., consider having aluminum pieces, or aluminium, depending on how you'd like to pronounce that. Maybe even aluminum instead of silver. It's up to you. Copper, I mean, look, copper is still going to be copper. You're going to get that green oxidization. And actually, here's a challenge for any of you who are watching out there, and don't look on Google. If you don't know, then don't know. Do you know both what the common term for what the rust equivalent of copper is called? And do you know why it is called that? I'll let you think on that for a couple minutes as I narrate here. Actually, here, coins and currency, right? Though you might be able to barter valuable items in some areas, currency is the most versatile way to make transactions when you head to market. The most common currency is coin. For most commoners and beginning adventurers, the standard unit is the silver piece. Each silver piece is of a standard weight of silver and is typically accepted by any merchant or kingdom, no matter where it was minted. There are 3 other types of common coins, each likewise standardized in weight and value. The first is the copper piece. By the way, if you are world building, realize that things like standard weights and measures, some cultures had them before others, but a standard weight and measure has a huge legal and cultural impact on a society. And standard weights and measures haven't been around all that long in the grand scheme of our human history. In fact, if you want a fun little thing, if you don't know this yourself, it might be apocryphal, although if so, it can still make sense. Why do we have something called a baker's dozen? Right? A dozen is 12. A baker's dozen is 13. How did that come about as a thing? And then, of course, you get the expressions, a pint's a pound the world around. And look at our standard weights and measures, especially metric. We can go into imperial all day long. Look, do you measure your fuel economy and how many rods to the hogshead your car gets? But especially with metric, look at how the metric system came about. Look up how we achieved our avoir du poids. Avoir du poids pound. Pound. In fact, do you know why we abbreviate pound as LB? Right? LB period is a pound. There's not an L or a B in pound. How did that happen? I mean, English, right? Hashtag just English things. Are you thinking? Have you ever questioned that before, actively? Let's see. So the first is copper piece. Each copper piece is worth 1/10 of a silver. The gold piece is often used for purchasing magic items and other expensive. 1 gold piece is worth 10 silver, or 100 copper pieces. The platinum piece is used by nobles to demonstrate their wealth for the purchase of for very expensive items, or simply as a way to easily transport large sums of currency. A platinum piece is worth 10 gold pieces, 100 silver pieces, or 1,000 copper pieces. Now, hey, Dark Wolf. All right, you're lurking a woo again. Something that you can think of as well. Look, we still use feet and inches, right? We use imperial measures for distance, and our coins seem to be set to more of a metric system. Have you thought about things like quarters? This doesn't seem to account for electrum pieces, which are electrum pieces are 5 silver or half a gold, or like a 50-cent piece if you're looking at that in a U.S. currency. But does it have to be as convoluted as the monetary system in the Harry Potter universe? Where there's like 13 or 15 X's to the Y, or you trade 3 pine cones for a squirrel, or other units of bartering and measure. Here, look, it's nice and easy math, right? 10, 10, 10, and 10, and you could multiply it. But depending on the flair you want to give, especially if you aren't using things like meters in your system, then if you're not using things like meters, then do you have quarters? Does it actually take 12 silver? 12 silver to a gold. And so, the silver might be abbreviated to DOZ, D-O-Z, because you need a dozen silver to a gold. And then maybe it's actually 20 gold to a platinum, right? And so platinum might be called, I don't know. At Starbucks, they call Ventis that because Venti's Italian for 20. So gold pieces might be, I don't know, Bright Vent or I don't know, something along those lines. You could make it up. But have these considerations for your homebrew game. I know that here we're talking about Pathfinder, and I'm saying, well, here, let's translate this to homebrew. But as you go through system documents like up above here, you can find some really cool inspiration to translate aspects into your homebrew game. Or even the concept in Pathfinder 2e that a critical is always on a 20, well, a critical success and a critical failure is always on a 1, but there's an alternative where you can have a critical if you achieve a number of 10 or higher on whatever the AC or the DC, electricity, on an AC or DC check of some kind. Critical success plus, or if you miss it by 10 or more, then it's a critical failure. That's an easy rule you can import if you like the sound of that into your homebrew world of whatever. Okay, coin bulk. Bulk. Remember, bulk is all capital letters in this channel. Coins are popular due to their portability. 1,000 coins of any denomination or combination of denominators counts as one bulk. It's not usually necessary to determine the bulk of coins in fractions of 1,000. In other words, 100 coins don't count as a light item, and 1,999 coins count as one bulk, not two. Most of the items in the following tables have a price, which is the amount of currency it typically takes to purchase that item. However, some of the items listed have an inherent or otherwise meaningless cost indicated with a dash. This typically indicates that an entry can't be purchased. An item with a 0 price indicates that it's normally free, but its value could be higher based on its quality or the composition of its materials. Most items can be sold for half their price, but coins and raw materials, such as crafting components, can be exchanged for their full price. Now, I've taught economics. I have my bachelor's and my master's is in business. I could go into economics and trade and market and whatnot all night long. I promise I won't. But I do want you to consider the fact that, hey, Illumines, I do want you to consider the fact that by simply by role-playing, does it really matter the system? Not necessarily. It could be Pathfinder. We'll stick to that. If you role-play long enough, you are going to have exposure to so many different disciplines. Yeah, a lot of business ones, economics, or maybe bargaining, or whatnot. You're exposed to philosophy, religion. You're exposed to political science. You're exposed to math, or even some form of or several sciences, whether they're hard sciences or soft science, like a social science or something. If you play D&D for 10 years, 20 years, you've effectively earned several associate degrees in various fields, whether you knew it or not, because you've learned about and you're practicing all of these elements: biology, environmentalism, climatology, etc., and so forth. That's right. Let's get this bulk on, Illumines. Each item has an item level, which represents the complexity of the item and any magic used in its construction. Simpler items with a lower level are easier to construct, and you can't craft items that have a higher level than your own. If an item's level isn't listed, its level is 0. While characters can use items of any level, game masters should keep in mind that allowing characters access to items far above their current level may imbalance the game. Carrying and using items. A character typically has 2 hands, allowing her to hold an item in each hand or a single 2-handed item using both. Drawing or changing how you're carrying an item usually requires an interact action. Dropping items instead uses the drop action. Table 6.2, Changing Equipment, lists some ways that you might change the items you're holding or carrying, and the number of hands you need to do so. Many ways to use items cost multiple actions. For example, drinking a potion stowed in your belt pouch requires drawing it with an interact action and drinking it with an operate activation action. Here again we get to, and I'm saying this neutrally, we get to the micromanagement level of gameplay, where everything you do has a hard mechanical entry. I know that we're saying we're comparing it to 5th edition. We are. Look, there's broadly on your turn you get an item interaction for free. But they just leave it an item interaction. How, they give some suggestions, but they let you define it. And here, Pathfinder is very specifically getting into, you have an economy of action in Pathfinder. And so they're giving you all kinds of different ways to fill up your potential slots. Bulk. Especially heavy or unwieldy items can make it more difficult for you to move swiftly, as can overloading yourself with too much gear. The bulk value of an item reflects how difficult the item is to handle, representing both weight and the size of the item. In most cases, you don't need to worry about bulk unless you're carrying numerous substantial items or you have a low strength score. Now, conceptually, I do enjoy this more abstract number of bulk. So that way, you're not counting 5 pieces of chalk in D&D as like half a pound, and then that goes against your weight capacity or encumbrance if you're playing with encumbrance. Now, I know a lot of D&D players who, DMs, not even just PCs, who don't even, look, they don't care. Who wants to keep track of the weight of all this stuff? And in all honesty, that's why a lot of people just get a bag of holding. Because this is a magic item whose purpose is to avoid playing an accounting minigame. Because you could just throw in like 500 pounds of something into a pocket and there you go. Now, I don't play with those. As I run my private campaign world, I don't play with extra dimensional spaces. So you do actually have to be wary about what you have, because that's what you have. So I like the concept of bulk. It does have a breakdown where 10 light items count as 1 bulk. But that seemingly is where that stopped. Let's continue. You can carry an amount of bulk equal to 5 plus your strength modifier without penalty. If you carry more, you gain the encumbered condition. You can't hold or carry bulk, more bulk than 10 plus your strength modifier. If you're encumbered, decrease your speed by 10 feet to a minimum of 5. This applies to every movement type you have. You also increase your armor's check penalty by 2, or take a -2 check penalty if you're unarmored. Now, if I recall correctly, let's see, we're on page 174. If your speed would be reduced by the armor you wear or the encumbered condition, you ignore 5 feet of that reduction as a dwarven trait. I was going to say, I remember the encumbered. I'm like, well, how often are you purposely gonna slow yourself down as a pack mule of the party? Do people go to their way to play Nodwick the minion? If you don't know who Nodwick is, you check it out. All right, but it looks like armor can reduce your speed as well, so this would come in a lot more it would be a lot more handy. Let's go back to 174. Items have a number to indicate their bulk value. It may be light, indicated by an L, or negligible for the purpose of determining bulk, indicated by a dash. For instance, full plate armor is 4 bulk. A longsword is 1 bulk, and a dagger or a scroll is light, and a piece of chalk is negligible. 10 light items count as 1 bulk, and you don't count fractions, so 9 light items count as 0, and 11 items count as 1. Items of negligible bulk don't count toward bulk unless you try to carry vast numbers of them, as determined by the GM. Estimating an item's bulk. As a general rule, an item that weighs 5 to 10 pounds is 1 bulk. An item weighing less than a few ounces is negligible, and anything in between is light. Particularly awkward or unwieldy items might have different bulk values. A 10-foot pole isn't heavy, but its length makes it difficult for you to move while you have one on your person. Items made for larger or smaller creatures have greater or lesser bulk, as described on 191. That's right, Illumines, we're talking about bulk. Donning and removing armor. Donning and removing, or donning or doffing, D-O-F-F, donning or doffing armor, are both activities involving many interact actions. It takes 1 minute to don light armor, 5 for medium, and to don medium or heavy, and 1 minute to remove any armor. Some abilities require you to wield an item, typically a weapon. You're wielding an item anytime you're holding it in the number of hands needed to use it effectively. You're not just carrying the weapon around, you're ready to use it. Other abilities might require you to merely carry or have an item. These apply as long as you have the item on your person, you don't have to be wielding it. Item damage. An item can be destroyed if it takes damage enough times. An item reduces any damage dealt to it by its hardness. The hardness of various materials is explained in the materials section on 354. If an item takes damage equal to or exceeding the item's hardness, the item takes a dent. Ooh, alright, so now we're getting in... I'm not saying this is good or bad, but we're getting into minutia. We are getting into... We're micromanaging maybe the hit points, effectively, of our items. The item takes a dent. If the item takes damage equal to or greater than... or equal to twice its hardness, it takes 2 dents. For instance, a wooden shield, hardness 3, takes 10 damage. That takes 10 damage would take 2 dents. A typical item that can take only 1 dent without becoming broken. A second dent causes it to become broken, though it can still be repaired. An item that would take a dent or become broken while already broken is destroyed beyond salvage. Some magical or especially sturdy items can take more than 1 dent before becoming broken, as noted in their descriptions. So we kind of have a Breath of the Wild weapon damage system. Does this happen in D&D? Mechanically, only if you're super specializing in that kind of description. Otherwise, I believe they made the mending cantrip a cantrip for a reason. To just take care of a lot of the stuff in the background. So you don't have to manage the dents. Yeah, so you don't have to manage the hardness of all your items, then count the dents and go back and etc. and so forth. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this system? I don't want to make it seem convoluted. Maybe it does appear so to you, or maybe you say, no, it all makes sense. In a tabletop setting, where you're here to try and, I don't know, save the world, or, you know, or end it if you're playing the bad guys, does this bring a level of desired realism? Or does this bring some sort of level of play that you enjoy? You know, it's like playing Fallout 3 New Vegas with the mode where it actually does track your food and water and heat because you're out in the desert. A lot of people may not play with that on because they don't want to micromanage that stuff, and more people might play with it on because they want to experience the more realistic conditions of being out in the middle of a desert. And by the way, so yeah, here's our coin values. draw a stove, pick up an item, and so here's the table on how to swap equipment that you're holding. Which gets down to the level of detail where you just change the grip on an item. Broken is a condition that affects objects. Actually, you know what? Hang on. It goes back, it's talking about a shield taking damage. I mean, that is the point of a shield. I kind of wonder then if your armor and shields, later on we'll discover, are actually meant to, you know, you're meant to record the damage your armor absorbs or takes in order to dent your armor or your shield in order to necessitate repair. Broken is a condition that affects objects. A broken object can't be used for its normal function, nor does it grant bonuses. It still imposes all penalties normally incurred by carrying, holding, or wearing it. For example, a suit of armor would still impose its dexterity modifier cap, check penalty, and so forth. Broken armor is an exception. It still grants its item bonuses, but also gives you a conditional penalty to AC depending on its category. Ah, so here we go, yeah. -1 for broken light armor, 2 for medium, 3 for broken heavy armor. Object immunities. Inanimate objects and traps with object immunities are always immune to bleed, disease. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you can at your 10-foot pole be asleep or enfeebled. Many objects are immune to most other conditions at the GM's discretion. For example, or for instance, a sword can't be hampered, but some effects that cause the hampered condition might work on moving a blade trap. Intelligent items are not immune to mental effects. Armor increases your defenses, but some medium or heavy armor can hamper your movement. If you want to increase your defense beyond the protection your armor provides, you can use a shield. Armor always protects you while you're wearing it, but you have to spend an action to raise a shield in order for it to improve your AC for that round. Aha! That is an important note. So you can wear a shield, but you're not considered to be using it unless you're spending one of your 3 actions per turn to actually to raise your shield and use it in combat. Questions, comments, concerns? Again, we can see compared to 5th edition D&D, that's just checking the binary condition of shield or no shield. And it either provides a constant +2 AC bonus or no bonus. Here, you have different kinds of shields, and you're using your actions to actively use your shield in combat. And you can decide conditionally round to round if you want to enjoy those bonuses. Does this seem like more micromanagement? Does this seem like way too detailed? I don't know. Consider it. It's one more option on the battlefield. You know? You could even say, well, what's the point? I want to wear a shield. I'm a sword and board person. Or, you know, you want to go like an axe or a warhammer and a shield. And then you may say, well, now my action economy is being taxed because I do have to actively employ it. That said, your enemies are having to actively employ theirs too to keep their shields raised. But I wonder, especially for those who might enjoy min-maxing, how many builds we'll see where shields are included, because that does tax, or it does take up one of your actions, when instead you could just be dealing more damage, or, I don't know, casting more spells, or whatever it is we'll see come out. You know, is the shield bonus worth it? And we'll get to what the shield bonus is shortly. Would it make sense to have your shield on your back to protect you from a back attack? Arguably, I'd say if you're wearing armor, that's already protecting your back in a mechanical fashion. And in this system, it seems like it would still require you to spend one of your 3 actions per turn to use your shield to try and position your back in a way to achieve some kind of shield bonus. Because otherwise, if you're wearing a shield on your back, it's sort of like, what, like half breastplate kind of a thing. Your armor class measures how well you can defend against attacks. Your touch armor class, so there are two ACs. There are two ways to be hit in Pathfinder 2e. Protects attacks that only need to touch you. Your armor class equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier up to your armor's cap, plus your proficiency modifier for any armor or shield you are using, plus the armor's item bonus to AC. If you're using both armor and a shield, apply the lower of the two proficiency modifiers. If you're not wearing armor, substitute your proficiency in unarmored defense. Your touch armor class uses the same calculation, except add your armor's item bonus to tack instead of its bonus to AC. Some spells, magic items... magic item, I guess it... So, we found a typo. It should be magic items plural, right? And abilities give your character a bonus or penalty to AC. That was some fun sarcasm, by the way. I am not petty nor nitpicky. It's a playtest packet. These also apply to tack unless otherwise stated otherwise. AC and tack bonus, these numbers are the item bonuses you add to your armor class and touch armor class respectively. Dexterity modifier cap. And that exists in D&D. In so much, actually, you know what? Let's just go to it. All right, let's go to Chapter 5. I know my noggin is blocking a little bit of it here. The only cap exists in the tier of medium armor, where you know that all medium armor gives you a maximum 2 that you can add to your AC. All light armor, dexterity for days, and heavy armor nor shields don't count any dexterity. Positive or negative, by the way. Otherwise, you know, if your dex modifier is negative for these, because dexterity is at least partially taken into account, a negative dex modifier could have an effect here. Okay. So let's keep this up, and we can bop back and forth as we will. Whoop, that's the DM guide. Not this. Here we go. Check penalty. You take this untyped penalty to strength, dex, and con-based skill checks, except for those that have the attack trait. Armor that is better than standard quality has a lower check penalty, as described on page 190. The check penalty in 5th edition D&D is as follows. You have disadvantage to stealth wearing some of these armors. Not complex. Not nuanced. That said, this could open up conversations with your DM about one thing or the other. But if we come over here, you can see that in the table for armors, there's a lot of information here for you to reference. Right? Padded armor, there's its cost, AC bonus, tack bonus, dex modifier, cap. So, you know, here, you can still only get so much out of it. There's no check penalty, no speed penalty. It is a light, for its bulk, it counts as a light item. And it has this trait of fragile. Which, traits are probably, yeah, stuff, it's probably going to be down there. And so here is more math for you to consider for your character. What is going to be the best, right? If it talks about with dwarves. Dwarves can ignore the first 5 feet of a speed penalty imposed by armor or encumbrance. And so a dwarf wouldn't lose any speed penalty in any medium armor, and would only lose 5 feet of speed wearing heavy armor. As you can see, the heavier the armor, you also get higher check penalties against certain skills that to strength, dex, and con-based skill checks. And that, I am presuming, is to just represent it's harder. It is harder to swim or endure elements or something like that with heavier armor. That very well may be, and in comparison, you say, "Wow, that kind of makes a lot of sense." Should I be able to swim just as well in plate armor as I can in leather armor? Possibly. Maybe, maybe not. Look at it this way. In D&D, right, there are some basic strength ability scores you need to have to wear types of armor. If you have a strength of 15, this is naturally implying that you are going to be a better swimmer because you have a higher strength than someone who has a strength of 8 or 10 or whatnot. And therefore, any of the encumbrances, any extra weight, because here, look at the difference. You have plate mail, which is 65 pounds. I mean, as compared to what? There's no strength requirement to wear half plate, and that's so there's only a 25-pound difference, and yet someone who has a strength of 8 can swim. Can swim with no, nothing hampering them. And so this is a way that this has abbreviated a lot of the considerations. Stronger characters are wearing heavier armor. Stronger characters are going to be just intrinsically better at performing feats of strength, dexterity, or constitution, presumably. I mean, for strength for sure, for athletic stuff, moving around, climbing, swimming, which are usually the things that we might consider armor to hamper. Though when we come over here to Pathfinder, there's all kinds of extra information for you to mull over, to process, to incorporate into your character. Again, if you like min-maxing, this seems like an awesome system where you can thread needles in everything, and then you pull everything together into one beautiful, optimized character that has taken everything into consideration. It's almost, and I don't say that with sarcasm. Look, I'm broadcasting on Twitch. I watch programs on Twitch, or I'll watch YouTube videos of people who speed run or execute various expert glitches and whatnot. I like seeing that. I watch different game marathons where people are racing each other, or, it's competitive. And so it's difficult to speed run a dungeon per se. So where you get this kind of mental exercise is when you have so many inputs and options like you do in a video game, such as what you're presented here. There's kind of this race or this competition. Who can build the best goblin alchemist? And then when you submit your build, it has taken 100 variables into consideration. And therefore, that's how you can flaunt to your community or to your GM or your fellow players or whatever that you know what you're doing, because you have considered every piece of information, every ancestry, not racial, but every ancestry feat, every alchemist class feat, every skill feat. You have considered every entry here. If you decide to wear hide armor as an alchemist, you have taken all of this into consideration as well. Speed penalty while wearing a suit of armor. Your speed is reduced by the listed amount to a minimum of 5 feet. Bulk. This entry assumes you're wearing the armor and distributing its weight across your body. A carried suit of armor usually has one more bulk, or one bulk total for armor of light bulk. This adjusted bulk is increased or decreased for armor of non-standardized units. So Illumines, kind of getting to what you said about wearing the shield on your back. I don't know, that might be an example where it wouldn't necessarily add bulk. But this system is saying there's a difference between wearing a suit of armor. So I don't know. Let's say that actually let's go up to it. It's just right up here. Oh, there's even there's a level 2 full plate. But still, let's say that you're wearing this full plate here. That you have to at least be level 2 to wear. Which, I mean, look, we start at level 1, and heck, a lot of campaigns even start higher. So it is 4 bulk. Now, you defeat a knight in honorable combat, and you remove his armor from him, as you are going to carry him back to your camp to use as a hostage to negotiate a ransom or some other concession. And you are carrying his armor back. That armor counts as 5 bulk. And the reason being, you aren't wearing armor, you aren't wearing his armor on you as designated, right? It's in a big sack. It's like in a big comically oversized burlap sack over your shoulder, and so it's like bouncing against you. It's clanking. It's wibble wobbling all over. And so when you're carrying armor as an item, it adds 1 more bulk as opposed to you wearing it, and therefore it's distributed like you're using it as it was meant to do. Is that a good level of detail? Is it a complication you think people are going to just, track and follow? Because there's a lot of opportunities to play accounting minigames in Pathfinder playtest. Armor traits. The trait for each suit of armor appears in this entry. Armor can have the following traits. Clumsy. This armor's dexterity modifier cap also applies to reflex saves and to all dexterity-based skill and ability checks that don't have the attack trait. Fragile. If fragile armor takes a dent, it's automatically broken. Aha. So we come up here. If padded armor takes a dent, your padded armor is gonzo. However, up here, it's not automatically broken if it takes a dent. You just get that. You get that penalty up here. That is talked about, broken armor is an exception. It still grants item bonuses, but it also gives you a conditional penalty to AC. Clumsy, this armor's dexterity modifier cap also applies to reflex saves and to all dex-based skill and ability checks that don't have the attack trait. And noisy, this armor checks penalty increases, the armor's check penalty increases by 1 on stealth checks. And this is where we do see a little overlay, because again, the only skill that armor affects in 5th edition is stealth, and in that case, it gives you disadvantage, which is mechanically a -5. Well, not mechanic. It is statistically a -5. A shield requires the use of one of your hands. It grants its bonus to AC and TAC only if you use an action to raise a shield. This grants the shield's bonus to armor class and touch AC. As a circumstance bonus until the next turn starts. The shield's check penalty applies whenever you're wielding the shield, regardless of whether the shield is raised. While you have a shield raised, you can use the shield block reaction to reduce the damage you take by the shield's hardness. 3 for wooden shields or 5 for steel. So here it is offering that you can, not only then can you spend an action to get the AC bonus of your shield, you can then use a reaction to mitigate incoming damage by your shield. Is this a more realistic use of a shield? Do you see that as being useful? I don't know. What are your opinions? Pardon me. If you attack with a shield, treat it like an attack with an improvised weapon. This deals the heavy shield bash damage or light shield bash damage as appropriate to the shield's type. If you want to reliably use your shield to attack, you need to buy and attach a shield boss or shield spikes to the shield. These work like other weapons and can even be etched with runes. All right, so far, so it sounds like maybe if you use your shield to reduce damage, that could dent or break your shield. Though, how did I miss? Did I miss then how your armor can become dented? Because he uses a wooden shield as the example. For instance, a wooden shield, hardness 3, takes 10 damage, would take 2 dents. An item can be destroyed if it takes damage enough times. So we're treating a shield as an item. Are we accounting for the material of your armor? And so as you take damage in combat, does that put dents in your armor? So actually in a combat, you are losing AC over the combat because as you're taking damage through your armor, it is it's getting it's getting dinged and dented and all that. Or maybe kind of like shields, do you choose to have your armor mitigate incoming damage and thereby possibly denting your armor? I don't know. Let's continue and find out. Let's continue and find out. Attack rolls. When making an attack, determine the result of your attack by rolling d20, add your modifier. If you meet or exceed, and if you, if you get 10 over the AC of your enemy, then that's a critical hit. You don't need just a 20 for that. When making an attack, strength dex, multiple attack penalty. If you attack more than once on the same turn, your attacks after the first take a penalty called a multiple attack penalty. Your second attack takes a -5 penalty, and any subsequent attacks take a -10. This penalty is untyped and is cumulative with all other penalties. The penalty doesn't apply to attacks you take when it isn't your turn. Alright, so if swinging your sword is one action, and you can take 3 actions per turn, you can go swing, 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 even as a level 1 whatever. Your first one is free. Your second one is a -5 to whatever your bonus to hit. And then your third, or if for some reason you're granted a 4th or a 5th, all of these are at -10. Which would make it more likely that you suffer a critical miss, which, depending on your GM or even the system, then we haven't gotten to it yet, could mean maybe, I don't know, like you lose grip of your sword and it flies out of your hand or something. Or it breaks, or it takes a dent or something. You can strike with your fist or another body part, calculating your attack and damage rolls in the same way you would with a weapon. Counts as a simple weapon, so almost all characters start out trained in unarmed attacks. Use the statistics for a fist even if you're kicking, kneeing, or attacking with another part of your body. Some Ancestry feats, class features, class feats, and spells give access to special, more powerful armed attacks. Damage rolls, that's easy. It's your weapon damage die plus the appropriate modifier. Critical hits, we just went over that. 20 or 10 or above. Let's see. If you critically succeed at a strike, your attack deals double damage. This damage doubling applies only on strikes. Other attacks, such as spells or some uses of the athletic skill, describe specific effects that occur. Alright, so here's a difference. This is just saying it's double damage. If you're swinging a sword and it deals 1d8 plus 2, and let's say you rolled maximum, right? 8 with your sword plus 2 from your strength, and you get 10, your critical hit is going to be 20 damage. In D&D 5th edition, a critical is you get twice the dice, but you can only add your ability modifier once. Improvised weapons. If you attack with something that wasn't built to be a weapon, such as a chair or a vase, you're making an attack with an improvised weapon. Treat it as a simple weapon of poor quality. The GM determines the amount and type of damage the attack deals, if any, as well as any weapon traits the improvised weapon should have. Characters who focus on combat need to carefully consider their choice of weapons, evaluating whether they want to fight in melee or at range, damage potential, and the special features of various weapons. So you're shopping for weapons like you're shopping for gods as a cleric. It is saying that, look, you have to look at everything, consider all the choices, and choose your weapons carefully. Characters who are primarily spellcasters usually just need to pick up a backup weapon in the best category they're proficient with. When selecting never use a preposition to end a sentence with. When selecting weapons, you should start by identifying the weapon types that you have proficiency in. You should then compare weapons within these types to determine which ones you'll have the highest melee or ranged attack modifier with. It's usually considered best practice to select both a melee and a ranged weapon during character creation so you can contend with a broader variety of foes. Alright, so here, it is telling you, choose a weapon and hone it, right? Min-max it. Look at all the properties and select this weapon as the best weapon for you. Is that good? Is that bad? If we come over here, right, let's pop back over. And let's go to... it's taking a little extra because I'm zoomed in here. So if we look here, really, there's just broad categories, and every weapon is kind of a placeholder for a line of statistics. That is then, not really personified, I guess objectified as an object, as being represented by, you have a mace, and so anything that's kind of like a mace is going to have these properties. And especially when we get over to monks or in the DMG over here. Whoops. Stop it. Let's zoom in. You don't need to have 11 billion different weapons with very subtle, properties. When it comes to monks, or it's even just saying, look, are you in a different region of the world and you want to compare it to an IRL different area? In the DMG, a club is a tonfa if you're going for Japan or Japanese language, or a bian if it's China or Chinese. A great club is a tetsubo. A great sword is a chongdao, or a nodachi. We go to a longsword. A longsword in D&D, static katana is a longsword. Does a katana need to have a completely different line? Maybe, if you want nuance and you want subtlety. But we'll get to a roleplay consideration back when we're going to pop over to Pathfinder. But it is interesting that Pathfinder's telling you, look, min-max your weapons. Shop for the best weapon that can maximize damage for your character. Do I agree with that philosophy? No. I'm not a min-maxer. Frankly, use a weapon you're going to have fun with. What's the difference of average damage between a D6 weapon and a D8 weapon? Your answer is 1. If you choose if you choose a weapon that deals a D6 as opposed to a D8, oh, you know what? We came up with this in our chat. Rogues get proficiency with a rapier or a short sword, and you go over here and you're like, is there a? They're both finesse weapons, right? Look at the rapier, and now look at the short sword down here. Now, a short sword does have the light property, but if you're not using it for two-handed attacks, that's irrelevant. And you say, look, they're both piercing. A short sword deals 1d6. A rapier deals 1d8. Why would anyone ever take a short sword over a rapier? Well, if you're only looking at pure damage output, you are correct. If we're looking at the economy or our opportunity cost of dealing damage, on average, we will deal 1 damage point less with a short sword than a rapier over the long term of a campaign. Right? Because you'll be dealing, instead of dealing 3.5 damage per swing, you'll be dealing 4.5 damage per swing. Think of this, though. What is the difference between a rapier and a short sword outside of its sterile mechanical statistics? Challenge for you out there. And by the way, I'll make good. The green on copper is called verdigris. 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 So if you see statues or like church rooftops or, you know, a penny that has green, that rust is called verdigris. And that name, if you translate it, it's green grease. And I don't mean grease as in the slimy stuff. Verd, green, right? And the GRIS is referring to grease because many of their statues, many of their architecture, many things had copper as either a part of the alloy or were just made of copper. You know, think of all the public artworks and whatnot that were in the temples and such. And so, because it was so prominent in Greece, you know, as the materials were used more often throughout the world, verdigris, right, green of Greece, became a universal term for the rust of copper. Fun fact, huh? So here's one possible solution. Why would you take a short sword over a rapier if not for pure damage output? Could you wedge a rapier that has a long, thin blade in between two bricks or two, like in a log cabin between two planks? And can you use that rapier as like a step-up stool or a climbing implement? Could you use a rapier to... I mean, they both deal piercing damage, technically. But let's look at the weapon. It's a broader blade. It's a shorter blade. You know, could you use it as a pry? Could you jam a rapier as like into the bottom of a door to try and wedge it shut? Now, these are things that you're finding in either the Pathfinder or the D&D rulebook. So let's be on equal and fair grounds here. But if you're a rogue and you're not concerned with the loss of 1 damage on average, think of the versatility you could get with a short sword. Conversely, if you're a rogue, is a rapier longer in blade than a short sword? Mechanically, you don't have reach. Could you maybe describe a situation where you take your finesse rapier and you kind of lean over with it, and you use it to kind of like to, you know, stab an apple, you know, a little farther away, and then kind of bring it over and eat it very subtly? each could have their own advantages depending on what you want to do creatively with it. So anyway, yes. Selecting weapons. When selecting weapons, you should start by identifying the weapon types you have proficiency in. You should then compare weapons within these types to determine which one you'll have the highest melee or ranged attack modifier with. So it is actively telling you solicit weapons and choose them based on the highest number that you can get. Conceptually, I do not agree. I get it. I'm not offended by it, but I get it. I just... Seeing the rules encouraging that kind of min-maxing, and instead of having fun with a weapon that maybe you have one less number to hit with, as the touchy-feely kind of, feel-good hippie DM I am, that I don't like how that's phrased. And so I get the rules as intended, the RAI, R-A-I, rules as intended. I just don't like the rules as written when it comes to that. It's usually considered best practice to select both a melee and ranged weapon during character creation. Yeah, I mean, subtly D&D encourages that by giving you ranged and melee weapons as a part of your package. So seeing it written out like that, does that make it a little harsher? Does that make it a little bit more real? Bludgeoning, piercing, slashing. Okay, that's the same. Ranged and thrown weapons have a range increment indicated here in feet. Attacks with the weapon work normally up to that distance. Attacks beyond the weapon's range increment take a -2 penalty for each additional multiple beyond. For example, a short bow takes no penalty for a target up to 60 feet away, a -2 beyond 60 up to 120, -4. So every increment of the starting range is an additional penalty. In D&D, it's not necessarily binary, right? You have your range of 60 feet, and then 60 to 120 it goes to disadvantage, and then beyond that it is it's not possible. I don't know, unless you role play something with your DM. Attacks that would take a penalty greater than -10 due to range are impossible. So it's a softer distance. Ranged weapons indicate how many interact actions it takes to reload them. This can be 0 if drawing ammunition and firing the weapon are part of the same action. If an item takes 2 or more actions to reload, the GM determines whether you can spend those actions out of sequence or if they must be performed together as an activity. Then it talks about how many hands you have to have free. Ammunition. Some entries in the ranged weapons table are followed by an entry indicating the type of ammunition that weapon shoots. But because of the relevant statistics vary by weapon, ammunition entries only list the name, quantity, price, and bulk. Effects based on a weapon's number of damage dice, such as charge or forceful, include only the weapon's damage die plus any extra dice for a magic weapon. They don't count additional dice from abilities, critical specialization effects, property runes, weapon traits, or the like. On a critical hit, you double this bonus only once. You don't double it again due to the number of damage dice increasing. We get into the minutia of how many hands, which does make sense. This does spell out things that are kind of similar in 5th edition. For example, you can shoot an arrow with your first action, use an interact to open a door with your second, then shoot another arrow. Okay, so here we go. We're into the nitty-gritty, right? Dagger, fist, gauntlet, light mace, long spear, mace, morningstar, sickle, spear, spiked gauntlet, and staff. Okay, so here we see a lot more nuanced. Here we see a lot more nuanced properties as compared to 5th edition. Look, here's a 1d4 bludgeoning weapon, a fist. Here's a 1d4 bludgeoning weapon, a gauntlet. Here's a 1d4 bludgeoning weapon, a light mace. And here's a 1d4 bludgeoning weapon, a staff. I'm only looking at damage, so bear with me. We're going to get to the other properties. Let's come up here. Here's a 1d4 bludgeoning weapon, a club. And a light hammer is also 1d4 bludgeoning. When we look, then, so there's only 2 weapons. You're like, okay, so that's, there's less. There's less weapons, or rather, if we're just looking at the stat line, there's not as much redundancy in 1d4 bludgeoning weapons. So now we look at the properties. Well, both are light, and you're like, okay, so that's redundant. Aha. A light hammer can be effectively thrown, therefore making this 1d4 bludgeoning a ranged bludgeoning option, as opposed to this 1d4 bludgeoning. So this is 1d4 bludgeoning melee, and this can be melee, but this can also be a 1d4 bludgeoning range. And we come down here to a 1d4 bludgeoning sling, and you're like, aha! Another 1d4 bludgeoning. How dare they? How dare they do that? Well, this one can't be used in melee. I mean, unless you're creative, right? This one, though, has the ammunition trait and has a greater range. Look, 3120 as opposed to the light hammer. So each of these 1d4 bludgeoning weapons are filling a particular slot in being unique. They are in Pathfinder as well, by the looks of it. But there are many more keywords that are making the weapons differentiated. Our first 1d4 bludgeoning, agile, finesse, non-lethal, and unarmed. With a fist. This is a gauntlet. This just goes down to agile and free hand as weapon traits. This one, agile, finesse, and shove. So all of them are agile. 2 of them are finesse. And other than that, the non-lethal, unarmed, or free hand or shove are different properties. We come down to our last one, our staff. This one has the property that if you use it in 2 hands, it goes up to a D8 damage instead of a D4. So that's actually that's not even they have the word versatile, but it is going to have to mean something different here. I went too far. Versatile weapon can be used to deal a different type of damage than the type listed in the damage entry. This trait indicates the alternate damage type. For example, a piercing weapon that has versatile S can be used to deal piercing or slashing damage. You choose the damage type each time you make an attack. Okay, so that does... Here we go. Okay, so this is just saying if you 2-hand the staff, it goes up to a D8 from a D4. So this is a D4 bludgeoning in one hand, but you can increase the damage type. Whereas if we come up here with a Morning Star, it can deal 1d6 bludgeoning, or you choose piercing damage. Could you, I don't know, in D&D, make the same argument? Well, I'm going to hit him with the flat of my blade. I don't know. You make a good case. Still, it's not mechanically written in the book, and that's what I guess that's what we're focusing on here. And in Pathfinder, you do have to pay attention here, because it's saying you're proficient in certain types of weapons, or you may take feats to make you a better club user or whatever. And so this is grouping weapons. Here's clubs. There's a club, a light mace club, a mace club, a Morningstar club, a staff club, or a night club. And now, ooh, here's our martial melee weapons, as opposed to our simple melee here. Lots of choices. Lots of choices for you. As compared, dun, 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 look at this. What do we have? Total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23. See how this compares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. All right, 23 stops at the longsword. So really, there you go. Hey, TJ, good to see you again. The blue area is all of the martial weapons that exist in 5th edition. Because the concept to simplify weapons is we're gonna make a set of variables and we're gonna slot in what weapon generally fits that, and then it's up to you to decide if does this weapon seem like a halberd or a longsword? Are we just gonna call it a katana, but it's statted after that? I don't know, something along those lines. You have way more options in Pathfinder, but arguably that's a necessity because with the way that they want to present the game is you being able to super specialize your character with a lot of feats and such. They have to offer options for all of these feats to interact with. I think that's also why they're saying, look, choose a weapon carefully at character creation. That way, if you want to be a dagger user, you can min-max everything about a dagger all throughout your adventuring career. But yes, TJ, there are many different weapons, and they all have different abilities. All these different weapon traits that are occurring. They actually have a bastard sword or like a hand and a half, so that's splitting the difference between a great sword and a long sword. They are including shield bashes, and whether or not you have a shield boss, which is like a reinforcement, or shield spikes. You're pretty hyped to make a fighter in Pathfinder 2e. I recently discovered the joys of bow fighter in 5e. TJ, fighters who go archery. I mean, not that you don't have a powerful ranger option, but depending on your build, that's a big qualifier. But depending on your build, arching fighters are super really good, powerful. Blow your mind. We're so used to the stereotype of fighters being the melee person. You can have a backline fighter with a bow and arrow, and you're the hot stuff. And TJ, when we do make characters, I think the first one we're gonna do is kind of like a generic male human fighter or whatever, or male or female. That's not really that part's not relevant. There's no stat difference. But like the generic human fighter. I guess we'll go shopping and we'll build all this stuff from the ground up. Oh, gotcha, TJ. All right. So look, I mean, look at the different polearms. Here's a rancier. Here's a gauche, a main gauche. I'm sorry. That was what was I thinking of? The main gauche is a knife type. What's the thing that sounds like that's in polearm? Oh, a guisarme. Here we are. Guisarme. And by the way, this is something that we've talked about in stream. For a flail, they have this disarm ability. I guess disarm, sweep, and trip. These are ways that you could use it. In 5th edition here, if we come over, a flail is just a D8 bludgeoning with nothing special. If you talk to people in HEMA, historical European martial arts, that they're training to wear armor and use these traditional weapons. Flails are very powerful because they're actually good at disarming, or they're even good at tearing away shields. And here it's just sort of like a generic D8 bludgeoning. which looks like this might just be filling a damage category. Yeah, with the exception of Warhammer, but that's versatile 1d10. Flail just exists to fill a stat line, it looks like. Simple ranged weapons. Martial ranged weapons. There's this deadly qualifier, whatever that is standing for. Uncommon simple melee weapons, some kind of a clan dagger for dwarves or a katar that monks can use. So we have a racial and a class weapon. Because uncommon from the beginning of the rules indicates that you can really only access uncommon if you are meeting a qualification of some kind. In one of the homebrew subreddits, a guy has been tweaking all the 5e base weapons. And you know, some of them could use it. What was proposed in our stream when we were talking with one of our members who's in HEMA is it would make sense if you're using a flail that it would have the property that it would deny an enemy its shield bonus, because flails are really meant to try and get around shields or strip shields away. And that could be balanced by the fact that a lot of monsters don't even have shields. So you know, it would be a sometimes option if you're fighting someone with a shield, but when you're actually getting a good, you know, you're getting use out of that weapon beyond it just being a generic D8 bludgeoning weapon. You know, so that in that circumstance where you're fighting someone like that, your flail will deny them 2 AC. That might make your enemy paladin, like you're with an 18, a 20, a 21 AC, that much more reasonable for you to hit, because you're denying that shield bonus. But if you go up and you try and bonk a spider, a giant wolf spider, there's no shield bonus, and so you're attacking it like you would attack anything else. You're loving the deadly on some of the Pathfinder 2e weapons. If you crit with that weapon, you replace the base dice with the upgraded dice. Ah, gotcha. So that's what that means. Uncommon martial melee weapons. So here, Goblin, Special Goblin is a dog slicer. Elven Curve Blade, you have to be an elf. A Filcher's Fork is for halflings. A Horse Chopper is a goblin weapon. Uncommon exotic melee weapons, a Dwarven War Axe, etc. and so forth. This is something, these were exotic weapons in 3rd edition, and you could take exotic weapons, if I recall correctly, in 4th. In 5th, they really did away with that, with like racial weapons and things along those lines. A halfling sling staff, or a in Dragonlance, that's a hoopak. I don't know, TJ. Without looking at monsters, I'd say it's actually easier to crit in Pathfinder, because you don't have to roll a 20 if you're beating an AC by 10 with your attack. You don't have to roll a 20. That's a critical hit. So what that could mean is if you're trying to shoot a goblin with an 11 AC, yeah, if you roll a 20, that's a critical hit. But if I have a +3 to hit, if I roll an 18 plus 3 is 21, that suddenly means that I can crit this goblin on an 18, 19, or 20, and so I actually have a 15% chance to land a critical hit on a goblin with an AC of 11 if I have a +3 to hit. And as your proficiency increases, as your ability modifiers increase, I think you'll find that the ability to crit in Pathfinder, unless the monsters like super scale, to match you, which they might, I don't know. 5th edition's kind of balanced it out where, a party of level 10 characters can still be threatened by, 10 goblins. You could still get attacks in because your AC may still be 16 from character creation at level 1. This seems to have some scaling to it, but, or you get to the point where maybe in Pathfinder at level 10, you only need an 11 or greater to crit the goblin, and so that's a 50% chance to crit without needing to roll the 5% chance for a d20. Does that make sense, TJ? All right, so there are many different weapon traits. It is going to be your responsibility as a player or a DM when you're trying to cross-reference all of these different weapons to understand what all of these abilities do. In 5th edition, it's a lot more subtle. They only have a handful of different kinds of weapons, which is allowing then a great axe to represent, yes, a great axe, but other similar weapons to it. Because they don't have as many conditional modifiers for you to memorize or use in combat. In fact, yeah, just as you said, TJ, deadly. On a critical hit, this weapon adds a weapon damage die of the listed size. This damage increases to 2 dice if the weapon is master quality and 3 if the weapon is legendary. For instance, a master quality rapier deals 2d6 additional piercing damage on a critical hit. There is if you download the full package, TJ, it does come with a bestiary. However, if you want to play Pathfinder, I would not download that because you could spoil yourself. So yeah, some weapons are racially locked or are locked behind a class. There's a lot here for you to consider when you're choosing your weapon. Critical specialization effects. Certain Ancestry feats, class features, feats, weapon runes, and other abilities can grant you additional benefits when you achieve a critical success on an attack roll with certain weapons. This is called a critical specialization effect. The exact effect depends on which weapon group your weapon belongs to as listed below. You can always decide not to add the critical specialization effect of your weapon. If an effect requires a saving throw or check, use your class DC. And so this is where we get to the where they put their weapons into different families. So not only do different weapons have different abilities or different like riders, they all have some kind of a different, if you crit with it, this is what happens. A knife. The target takes a 1d4 persistent bleed damage. You gain an item bonus to this bleed damage equal to the weapon's item bonus to attack rolls. Again, it's more to micromanage. It's more to pay attention. It's more to pay attention to. More for you to consider as you're building your character and going from there. Which I think is why they did go out of their way to specifically say, during character creation, look at all the weapons and options and just choose something that you're going to have the best chance with. Because there's a lot to choose from. I still don't like that philosophy, but I understand it. And that's my personal opinion. And as I've said, you can very much disagree with me. I won't hate you for it. In fact, that's what provides awesome conversation. As from guest to host and back and forth. Price, bulk. How many hands? And so now we're getting into the minutia of this is how, a backpack can hold up to 4 bulk worth of items. If you're carrying or stowing a backpack rather than wearing it, it has light bulk instead of negligible. And remember here in parentheses, it says level 2, level 7. It's recommending that your character can't access these items until that level, else it could affect game balance. So that's, you know, I guess it's up to you and your GM. You know, because there are different qualities. I mean, look, there's a crowbar up here. An expert crowbar. If we come down here, you know, you have to be level 2 to use this crowbar. Does that seem petty to have something kind of locked behind level 2? Or if not, I don't want to say petty, like, yeah, the writers of this are like, yeah, we're being spiteful. We're going to hide this behind level 2. No one will have access to the expert crowbar. I don't mean petty like that. Putting an item behind... I don't know, does putting an item like a crowbar behind a hurdle of level 2... Do you find this is necessary? Is this just extra information? Is it distracting? TJ, it is based around silver now. They're trying to normalize silver as the common coin. And so everything is presented in silver. Pat, hey, good to see you. From what I've seen and heard, there is just too much micromanagement and complexity. That's your opinion also? Pat, so far, I would agree with you. Now, do we have to finish the playtest to come to this conclusion? No. There are so many options. You can build a super specialized character to do, you know, to do something really super de-duper well. There are so many options in Pathfinder that maybe I feel spoiled by the simplicity of D&D 5th edition. Because I look at all these charts and I get them. They're not ununderstandable. But they are... It just seems, I don't know, so nitpicky, so micromanagement. There's so much nuance and minutia that I feel like I'm not playing a role-playing game. I feel like I'm doing a fancy form of accounting. Or, you know, I'm trying to... You know, I'm trying to do like a profit and loss statement. You know, I'm doing some sort of financial homework that it just has a Western fantasy twist to it. It is very overwhelming at a glance, TJ. I don't... Yeah, it's EVE Online, a spreadsheet simulator. So, and look, I mean, look, we're even talking about items here that cost more, but Expert and Master are hidden behind a non-obvious mechanic. If you go to a general store, is an NPC going to say, well, what level are you? I can't sell you, like you're buying alcohol or something, right? I can't sell you this crowbar until you show me that you're level 2 or level 7 or whatever. Is this just... I don't know. I don't know. I do. But I'm withholding final judgment until we finish. So yeah, items, we can go over items. I don't think there's necessarily anything here that is, you know, mind-blowing or extremely you know, a big revelation or a game changer between things that we can find in D&D or other role-playing games that are fantasy or sci-fi or whatnot. Though there, I mean, look, there's just a lot of stuff. Formulas, if you're playing an alchemist, this is how much these might cost. Spellcasting services, mug of ale, keg of ale, pot of coffee or tea, and you can find this stuff too over in D&D. Right? I mean, so look, there's a good amount of adventuring gear here too. I don't want to make it seem like, yes, 5th edition is the ultimate and it's the best, because we've dug into 5th edition, and in fact, there's some things I've read in this playtest that I think I would personally employ in a 5th edition game, because I think it makes sense. It's a cool idea. Artisan tools, mounts and vehicles, and then we kind of come to tack harness, trade goods, And there's by the way, lifestyle expenses, food, drink, and lodging, services. Bum-ba-da-dum. This might be a little bit different, but as we come down to the bottom here, I'm not going to compare prices between the two. That's kind of irrelevant. You know, all this is, it's fairly arbitrary. But it is nice to see that they have, you know, that they have this. Lodging for a day. Do you just want floor space? Do you just want to sleep on a floor with a roof over your head? That's cool. Oh, I'm sorry. Formulas are instructions that can be used to craft items. Because, yes, there is like an item crafting simulator or generator inside the rules here. And I'm not saying that in a bad fashion. Reverse engineering formulas, items with multiple versions. Gone Ronin, thank you. Run, follow me if you want to live. Ah, you already have. Hey, you want to rent a guard dog? That's cool, right? In fact, so things that this may have that D&D doesn't, you can use this as a guide. Did any of you ever think about renting or purchasing a guard dog? Renting a horse instead of just buying one outright? That kind of a thing? Different services? Your preference is rules light OSR systems. I do enjoy lighter rules. Now, I don't know if I'm hypocritical. I liked 4th edition D&D. I don't know if 4th edition had as much, maybe, as this Pathfinder Second Edition, because it seems like it's kind of emulating the system a bit. Though, of course, I was lazy and I had the character builder and the encounter builder and all that other stuff. The math, I think, was easier. Or there wasn't as much to consider, but the concepts are similar. Cost of living, animals, barding. Now, if you want to keep track of even more stuff on your character sheet, we get down to item quality. Yeah, hired help. That is in the PHB as well. Alchemists and wizards seem to be really money hungry. Says TJ. Oh yeah, or you know, if you're a crafter, you buy these formulas and stuff. 4th edition fitted a niche or specific style of play, but it was not something I enjoyed. I get that. A lot of people said 4th edition is an MMORPG. I get it. There's a lot of the concepts in 4th edition that I super relished. King, you know what sucks about Pathfinder? There are no hot dragon goddesses to lance, nor petite spider waifus. I don't know. I think we saw some drow in some of the illustrations that have shown up. And dragon goddesses? I don't know. We could go back up to the deity list. I'm sure you could find something that's close. Fourth edition had great warlock lore. Now, hang on, King. If we listen to people, 4th edition had zero lore. It had zero lore that doesn't tell us what to think about our own worlds and races and storytelling and all this other stuff. I'm obviously being sarcastic, but for many people, it's like, but there's no lore in the book. It's all abilities and mechanics, and I want you to tell me what I should think about other people's work. That's also sarcasm. King is not impressed by drow? With that Pat says, actually I like reading the Nentir Vale stuff. Alright, so if you're tracking everything on your character sheet, make sure you track down your item level. Because you're also keeping track of your item's HP and how many dents it has, and then the dents are going to determine if it's broken, and if it's broken enough, it's actually beyond salvageable. It's just scrap. Also, there's nothing wrong with how 4E set things up. People just found it too meta, even though 5E and 3.5 are littered with daily powers. Yeah, that's why they said it was an MMORPG. Like, what? I can only do this once a day? That's dumb. Meanwhile, in 3.5, one per day, spell-like ability, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, that makes sense. Some of the verbiage, I think, set it up to be very sterile or meta, like you said, King. Yeah, exactly, King. It's worded differently. Poor quality items, improvised or of dubious make. Poor quality items are never available for purchase except for in the most desperate of communities. Usually for half the price. Expert, Master, Legendary. And I mean, there's more statistics. It's stuff you can keep track of. Expert, Master, and Legendary items are of a superior quality and can be crafted only by characters with the respective proficiency rank in the crafting skill. Expert quality armor and weapons are second level items, except expert heavy armor, which is third level. Master quality armor and weapons are 7th level items, and legendary quality armor and weapons are 15th. Does that make sense to you all, to hide something behind a second level, you know, like wall or requirement, or third, or I guess if we're trying to go out of our way to balance math, but does that seem petty? I mean, are all campaigns starting at level 1, but you can't have this thing until the very next level that you probably will achieve if you're doing experience points by killing like 3 goblins? Well, you can't kill goblins in Pathfinder. By killing, I don't know, 3 giant spiders. You know, now that you've killed 3 spiders, you can use this crowbar. I get it, but They do, TJ, and that's why mechanically they're suggested to be put behind these level walls. You know, something like between a 15th level item. I get that. Or at least I understand it more than a 2nd level or a 3rd level. Really, this is an exercise in a philosophical... Really what we're doing, this is a philosophical exercise in what's called the Heap Paradox. H-E-A-P Paradox. Heap Paradox. And the Heap Paradox goes, if I have a salt shaker, right? And the end is twisted off. And I take 1 grain of salt out of the shaker and I drop it on the table. Do I have a heap of salt? What if I take a 2nd grain of salt and I put it on the table? Do I have a heap of salt yet? What if I have 30 grains of salt on the table? Is 30 grains of salt a heap of salt? What if I have 100 grains of salt? Is 100 grains of salt a heap? Or is really a heap of salt half the bottle? At which point in time we count how many grains of salt are in half a salt shaker, and it turns out to be 50,000. Do I still have a heap of salt if I have 49,999 grains of salt? What about 990? We're going to take 10 grains of salt away. Do I still have a heap of salt? Does that example make sense to you all? Pat says, nope, you have a pinch. In a sense, yes, in cooking terms. But if we're just looking for the qualifier of what is a heap of something, what is a heap of salt or sugar? Well, TJ, that might be, but if I have a piece of Himalayan rock salt, which I actually do, behind me, a piece of pink Himalayan rock salt that's about the size of this liter bottle, and I put it in front of you, is that a heap of salt? It's technically, I don't know, it's a chunk of salt. It is 1 unit of salt. It's just 1 big unit. Uh-huh. And so we're finding ourselves delving into heap paradoxes as we have more and more options. Now, from a business standpoint, it's nitpicking for nitpicking's sake, and I'll tell you though, again, as someone who is in business and has studied business as an undergrad and a graduate person, the more choices you give people, oftentimes they'll face paralysis, like choice paralysis, or you'll actually make them, even at times, resent the amount of choices that are available. If you have 10 different brands of coffee, or heck, even 20 different brands of coffee, and someone comes up and, they say, well, what would you like? Well, I want a coffee. All right, which of the 20 would you like? They're going to look and they're going to say, you know what? I'm not digging coffee, because you're making them think way too hard. They know they wanted coffee. They came to you for coffee, and instead you gave them 20 choices. Meanwhile, the coffee stand that has coffee, just generic coffee, maybe there's 3 choices. There's, dark, light, and decaf. The person who wants coffee is going to go up there, see 3 choices, and say, I want a coffee. And the person behind is going to say, sure, which would you like? And now, instead of having to weigh the pros and the cons and the prices and the sizes, because it's not just 20 coffees. If there's 3 sizes of coffee, there's 60 choices on that board to choose from. And therefore, there's 60 prices to consider. Instead, you have 2 sizes. You get a large or a small coffee, and we have light, dark, and decaf. There are only 6 choices for the person to choose from. I just want a coffee. I want a light coffee that's small. Bada boom! You got a coffee. You're satisfied as a customer. I'm satisfied because I got your business, and we go from there. And instead, then you come over and people's like, I want to choose between 60 different options on a board. Maybe some people do. But I think that the reason that 5th edition is seeing a lot of the success it has, shows like Critical Role and nostalgia and its age notwithstanding, which can be significant features, is because it takes so many of the choices away from you. That sounds negative, doesn't it? Yet instead, it's giving you options. It's allowing you to think creatively. You say, I want an elven archer. Sure, buddy. What would, you have an elven archer? What do you want? We have a couple choices here for you. And then you can choose a lot more simply than saying, well, do you want an elven archer, and tell me which elven feats you want? Tell me which archer feats you want. Tell me which skill feats you want. Tell me which type of bow you want. And then make sure that you track it and level it all the way up during your adventure. And you say, I just wanted to play an elven archer. Sorry, I just got on a... here, I'm going to use one of Journeyman 1026's emotes here. There we go. Pat says, heap and pile are fairly interchangeable with a slight nuance between them. Either way, big difference is that you can have 2 heaps or piles in close proximity to another. A native speaker would likely be to consider them a single pile and refer to them as a single pile or heap, according to Google search. Nitpicking fallacy, system fails to properly define terms. I'd throw this book at the writer, heave across the office, shatter everything on his desk. Decaf isn't a real choice, says TJ. Starbucks versus a gas station? Exactly, Pat. And you know what? How many times do you do this? Even if you go to Starbucks, do you order the same thing every time you go to Starbucks? Like, do you go... I do that if I go to Starbucks. I do not care at all for 95% of their menu. I go, and I might get a venti frappuccino. Like a mocha frappuccino. That's really all I care about. Maybe if I'm feeling sassy, I'll ask them to put a little bit of mint in it. Other than that, I don't care. Ain't nobody got time for that. And I just want a cold coffee that I know I enjoy the taste of. Or a better, Starbucks versus McDonald's. There you go, Pat. Coffee's not a valid choice, says Corrida. Critical Role, and King is getting all the grumbles out tonight. Corrida, that's a dangerous statement. Pat says OSR style would be an elf fighter that's focused on the use of a bow. Ranger versus fighter versus, says TJ. I'd rather never drink literal poison mashed up and turned into a drink. TJ, we can no longer be best friends. I'm not going to do an Uncle Iroh. We were never best friends, says Corrida. Oh man, shots fired. Yeah, but there's responsibility of it happening in the future, and now that chance has been removed. Well, I mean, look, so is tea and a lot of other things. Does that make it right? Not necessarily. I mean, it's that fallacy or whatever, if you want to call it as such. The smoker says, we all got to die of something anyway, so I'm going to keep smoking and then, suffer lung cancer or chronic bronchitis or emphysema and have to get your lungs removed. It's true. You chose how you're going out of the world. And if you're getting more benefit from smoking or drinking coffee or whatever, then you think you'll get on the back end. You're making an economical choice. Well, you want to talk about a real poison, Corrida? Dihydrogen monoxide is a scourge on the human race. In fact, I will support it. So here's an official website that is a dihydrogen monoxide FAQ. I would urge you have to understand the dangers of DHMO. Everyone, please, go to that site and educate yourself. No one in politics is talking about this. No one at the church pulpit is talking about this silent killer. Hi, Zan. Good to see you. Katie Sue, thank you for the host. And in the raid even. Savage Bear. Rah, 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 rah. Yep, King, sorry, you can't leave tonight. You haven't gotten your magic number yet with your own minigame. Corrida, thank you very much for the host. Welcome, everyone. All right, actually, so you all just hosted. I got to get up and get a snack. I'll try and rush it. But we've been up for about 2 hours or so. I got to get up and use the restroom and whatnot. Everyone, hey, stay tuned as we continue to go through the second edition Pathfinder playtest. And we're also talking about philosophy. We're talking about coffee. We're talking about a lot of different things. So, everyone, hang on, and I will be back ASAP.